So you figured out that morality is about absolutes. That when we say it's wrong to hit, it's wrong to steal, when you learn those things in kindergarten, it wasn't unless you have a badge and a gun or unless you're an IRS agent. And you figured out that government is force. As George Washington described it, government is not eloquence or reason, but force, like fire, a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And everything that the government does is one way or another at the barrel of a gun. So you figured out that you should question everything, but especially authority, and that you should challenge unjust authority. Well then, congratulations and welcome to the r3VOLution. Welcome to the freedom movement. That's right. You have figured out these fundamental truths and learned how to apply them to the world around you. When you realize that government is force, that everything it does is at the barrel of a gun, and that it's always morally wrong to initiate force against people who are acting peacefully, you get to be a part of the r3VOLution. So why do we call it the r3VOLution? Why not the revolution? Well, it's a revolution in the superficial sense of the word, in that we are having a revolving of the political reality and we are changing the political paradigm. But that's really not a revolving as much as it is an evolving, as we're seeing that the revolution is really all about, which is why we call it the r3VOLution. Evolvolution doesn't exactly have the same ring to it. But why the r3VOLution? Well, when you understand the philosophical axioms at the core of libertarianism, the idea of self-ownership, that you as a free, beautiful, independent human being own yourself, and with that have certain inalienable rights, well, you can't help but want to meet your fellow human beings with the same love, faith, and respect that you'd like for yourself. And the goal of the r3VOLution is to establish a free society, a voluntary society, free of coercion, free of force and fraud in human relationships, because we understand that those are always detrimental to humanity's ability to achieve its potential. So you have to look out for the false libertarians, those who would take up the cause of freedom or liberty. And on one side, I suppose you could say that you have people like Glenn Beck, who calls himself a libertarian, but agrees with Ron Paul on everything except foreign policy. And Ron Paul is the greatest champion of the message of liberty, of this core philosophical belief. And Glenn Beck likes to say that he agrees with Ron Paul on everything except foreign policy, which is kind of like saying, I agree with Jesus, except for that whole loving your neighbor thing. Not really up on that, yeah. So there are those false libertarians of the right. And then on the other hand, you have people like Bill Maher on the left. And I can't even understand how this guy gets away with calling himself a libertarian, but he has described himself as one, and likes Ron Paul on certain issues, but not on others. And basically, like anybody who doesn't get this message, still is looking at excuses for government violence. Then you have false libertarians from the center. Gary Johnson, who after interview as the presidential nominee of the Libertarian Party, in his uninspiring tone and manner of delivering his message, has made it clear that he doesn't actually get the philosophical message of libertarianism, the actual core of the r3VOLution, and therefore will never have the support of those of us who really believe in this message, except perhaps at the voting booth as the clearly lesser evil. And this isn't to pass judgment on any of these people's personalities or their own virtue, except for their inability to embrace true non-aggression. But Gary Johnson, great guy, very principled, very committed, absolutely demonstrated as governor of New Mexico in 8 terms, in which he vetoed more bills than the governors of all other countries or all other states in the country combined, which is as much a testament to the incompetence of the New Mexico state legislator as it is to Gary Johnson's integrity. But still, not quite there. Which is why we like to use precise terms, because libertarian might be a little bit more inclusive. We can include people that just want smaller government, that unfortunately have allowed themselves to register as libertarians with the government in the Libertarian Party, but aren't really there yet. And that's okay. We don't need to own the term. We don't need to control the language, but we do need to use precise terms when we talk about real libertarians. Voluntarism. Ron Paul describes himself as a voluntarist. The idea that all human interactions should be voluntary, free of force, fraud, and coercion. Simple as that. That no relationship should have any force in it. That everybody should be able to choose how they engage with the rest of the world and other human beings. Anarcho-capitalism, also a specific term to describe a propertarian society, that is a society that recognizes property rights without government. And no, property rights are not a construct of government. That is another justification for government violence. But anarcho-capitalism recognizes that the ideal society in which human potential can be met is one in which every interaction is based on the capitalist ideal. That is, individuals interacting voluntarily decide to interact because they both believe that it is for their own benefit. Anytime you introduce force, fraud, or coercion into that equation, or government, you inevitably reduce the potential of that relationship. I like the term philosophical libertarianism. That is, those of us who take the principles of libertarianism, individual freedom, personal responsibility, greater personal choice, all of these things, and take them to their philosophical conclusions. And my personal transformation here is pretty essential to my understanding, because for a long time I was an intellectual libertarian, or issues-oriented libertarian, as I might say now. And I could take the Nolan chart test, the political diamond that measures on one axis your belief in individual or personal freedom, and on the other axis, economic freedom, which is kind of an artificial divide to begin with. It's sort of like, these are the common ways that we can identify how governments like to take away freedom. They'll either take away your economic freedom or they'll take away your personal freedom, but inevitably they're really the same thing. And the division of what is economic and what isn't is also kind of artificial, based on the imposition of a monetary system. Really, all human relations, even ones of personal freedom, exercising your own property rights. It could be said that making marijuana illegal, that is, in the war on some drugs, which is based on the idea that if drugs can ruin your life, if we catch you using drugs, we're going to put you in jail and ruin your life. It's a violation of your property rights. You own your body. You have the economic right to decide what you put in it. In the same sense, your economic freedom to keep the product of your labor could be seen as a personal freedom, in that if you're interacting with another human being and exchanging goods and services as part of that relationship, the government has no business being a part of that. And I believed, as someone who is not indoctrinated into one particular dogma or another, that the world just kind of works better when people are free to decide what they put in their own bodies, when we're allowed to engage in the economy as we see fit, as opposed to how a central authority dictates, and when we're not killing each other in large numbers, calling it war, a euphemism for the systematic destruction of human bodies by machinery. I think anybody with a little common sense and basic decency can figure that out. And as Murray Rothbard said, there's nothing wrong with being ignorant of economics. But to go out and with a loud and vociferous opinion proclaim to know what you're talking about while maintaining that state of ignorance is a different thing altogether. And similarly, we have people in politics who have no idea what they're talking about, have no idea about the philosophical underpinnings or even the basic moral premises or rather should I say, immoral premises of what they're advocating for in government. So it's not a crime by any sense to not be a libertarian. It's only a crime to be advocating for political policies that are based on doing violence against people that are acting peacefully when you haven't really considered the implications of that. And I suppose the results of that mentality is what we see in the world around us today in the global paradigm of statism. So this idea of freedom by itself is kind of a dangerous one, or at least it can be. When people say, I want my freedom, or America should be a free country. Right, well, if it's a country with a central government and an elected representative of the people, well, inevitably, it's not free because you elected someone by majority vote, and therefore you have the majority violently imposing its will on the minority. So freedom isn't just something that you want for yourself in a matter of autonomy and pleasure or self-determination. No, for a libertarian, a true libertarian, freedom is more about how we treat each other and how we expect to be treated. Similarly, rights are kind of a dangerous construct. It's not really that you have a right to anything, but that it is morally wrong for people to treat you in a way that doesn't respect you as a human being. At least this is the perspective, I would hope, of the LoveOlution. And government is always a fancy excuse for violence, for imposing your will on others, for saying that you can't do that because I don't like that you're doing that, and so we're going to send men with guns one way or another to manipulate your behavior, either to kill you, to steal from you, or to lock you in a cage for non-compliance. So the message of the LoveOlution, the true libertarian message, comes down to restoring morality in all human relations, restoring the standard of morality that we all expect ourselves to live up to in our daily lives, and extending it into this field of government where we make an exception. We say, well, if it's government, morality doesn't apply. Well, I'm sorry, but it does. And government is a fundamentally immoral institution. And what the message of the LoveOlution comes down to, aside from can't we all just get along, is that we should treat all human beings with the love, faith, and respect that we would expect for ourselves, and not make exceptions for those who call themselves government or have a fancy hat or a well-written law or a shiny badge to justify their violence that they do against people who are acting peacefully. And that's why we call it the LoveOlution.